All right.
Hi, good afternoon. We have Rabi Abdul Samad here, a commentator on Middle East politics. He's from Lebanon, but he's based in the UK. A student of international relations. We have been
Study buddies.
Yes, and quite interesting to have him today in our Everyday Politics show. We are going to discuss today with him what is going on in Lebanon. As all of you are aware, there was explosions in Beirut about 20 days ago. To begin with, Rabbi, could you tell us if there are any breakthroughs in the ongoing investigation that was meant to find out who was behind that disaster and carnage?
Yeah, I mean, it came at such a time when Rafiq Hariri's decision in his assassination was coming out. It was going to come out on, I think, 6th of August, and the explosion happened on 4th of August. It's just like how when Rafiq Hariri went against the Syrian regime, he just happened to die. And according to the Lahai documents, it was the Bristol agreement, the Bristol visit, where Rafiq Hariri said, I do not agree with Syria kind of having control over the Lebanese. Once he said that, that is when it was proven through the Lahai that his assassination was going to happen. Now, this may strongly relate to the Hezbollah bombing, as even Hezbollah flaunted the people who has assassinated Rafiq Hariri as heroes, which is very problematic. And now, when this bomb happened, the first thing that Hezbollah said, and usually Hezbollah is great at accusing, the first thing that they said was, it's not Israel. So it usually without an investigation and without them looking into any information, without them knowing whether the airspace was invaded by Israel or not, they made that decision. So I think they could be part of the culprits who did this, along with the president and the other people within the previous governments, some of the people in the previous government. The problem is, it's very likely it's not a direct attack at Beirut or at the port. The problem is, it's an omission and neglect. It's neglecting the port. It's neglecting the tariff authorities. It's not making sure that there's no laws that or policing that is in place in Lebanon to stop the anti-corrupt groups in Lebanon. So the corrupt groups in Lebanon. So the anti-corruption laws are not policed in Lebanon well, and therefore, what's been clear is the 2,700 tons that meant to blow up, only 300,000 to 300,000 to a little bit more. 3,000 to a little bit more. 300 tons or a little bit more blew up, and the rest has been stolen by other groups. And this is the problem when something so yes.
Let me stop there, because you are mentioning corruption. You are mentioning like the link between the Harari, the death that caused the death of Hariri. Yes, sorry, Hariri. Let's first of all see why you're saying that there's a link between the explosion that killed Hariri and the explosion that rocked Beirut, and you mentioned Syria as well.
Yes.
where like when Hariri said no to the Assad pressure
Regime. Yeah.
regime, then he was kind of like you're saying that he
They
was,
they sealed his life.
and you're saying that this report also the findings of the report were this. So, what could be the most significant thing that could have caused the current recent explosion? How has Syria got to do with? I mean, how could
Syria,
Syria play?
Syria could be not associated with the recent bombing. It's unclear. I'm not an investigator or a guesser, and I'm not going to make any guesses. So I keep my honesty and truth to myself and to the people who are watching. However, it's based on what you can see. It's clearly that these have been stolen either through corruption, either the nitrate ammonium. It was left on Lebanon intentionally, and they refused to give them back. Although they did not, the last area of stop was not Lebanon. They did not meant to stop in Lebanon at all. So although they stopped, and although the government were informed of them, and as soon as some of the officials in the army was informed of it, they demanded that this material would be moved away from the port as soon as possible. Although it was not, there was a backdoor where the material was stolen over the last few years since 2014, and this neglect of the policing against anti-corruption, against uh, everything. It's just the neglect and the omission within the government ranks and within every other rank. That's what the real issue is about, and that's what caused the problem in itself. If you can't just put 2,700 tons in a port and leave them for 7 years without ever asking, oh, why are they there? And if they took a whole space in a port, why did this port authorities, why did the Beirut authorities, why did the government, why did the president, the vice president, the prime minister, why did the head of parliament do nothing about it and just ignored it until it disappeared? So they're either culprits in the acquiring of the material, and they took some of the material for themselves, as the bomb was not 2,700 tons worth. Or the other guess is they're not culprits, but they're omitting. They don't do their job properly, and if that's the case, it's even worse than the first case. So
Right.
both of
Yeah, let me kind of like intervene and kind of like ask more. Like we want to find out. We want our audience to find out the current situation, political situation in Lebanon. We know that the Lebanese politics is one which is after the civil war been sectarian based. So we have the Shiites, we have the Sunnis, and we have the Christians, and maybe a bit more other factions who are either in alliance with the three major groups. We know that the Hezbollah is supported by Iran, for example. We know the Sunnis get their support and backing from Saudi Arabia mainly, and maybe the Gulf states. And also we know the Christians, they have got support from maybe countries like France, I think, former colonial master maybe, I'll say. But do you think that, and what I noticed is that my observation is that the Lebanese people want this sectarian governance and this factional fragmented political establishment to go for good, and they want stronger government institutions. They want national
Who?
Lebanese
Do you mean the
identity.
Lebanese government?
Yeah, no, the people, the public.
Yeah.
They have been calling for an end to this sectarian-based political system. They have been calling for like proper government institutions in place. They don't want this kind of like power arrangements, and this power distribution. They find it is not actually leading to a solution to the problems they have, the day-to-day problems they are actually encountering, whether it's governance, whether it is the geopolitics, whether it is domestic issues like the economy and the social and cultural harmony and all of that. If you look at it, this kind of like current arrangement is only leading to more division and more kind of like conflict. But the people are now moving away from associating
Correct.
themselves with particular groups. So they came together, and we've seen from the series of protests in Beirut that have seen the government, resign. And again, we have seen the present explosion, which led the entire government to resign again. And this is actually maybe could lead to a better, more nationally united Lebanese agenda. Maybe. I'm not sure. What do you think? What's your take on this?
Unfortunately, the only branch of government which resigned is the branch which is associated with the Sunnis mostly. So the Sunnis are Rafiq Hariri's group, and then you have the Druze with them, and they're supported by some of the Christian factions, which they fought against each other in the Civil War. And then you have on the other side, you have the head of the parliament, which is Nabih Berri, which has been in power since 1992. And you also have the presidents of Lebanon, which have all, since recent times, I think since 1992 at least, roughly, before Emil Lahoud. So it's safe to say it's at least been 15 years to 20 years. It's all been the leadership, the presidents have all been generals, which are retired generals. The head of the armies are the presidents. So it's no one who's actually equipped with the knowledge to run a nation. They're equipped for war, and war is all they can do. They wage it on the people on daily basis in protests. They try to send the men as if they're in a war. They shot rubber bullets at protesters' faces in their eyes. They aimed at their eyes, which is there's nothing more evil than such a regime and such followers of regime as such. And then you also have the Nabih Berri guards who actually went and shot live round bullets at protesters. In the past, first when these protests started, there was a gentleman who was just standing near a car, and a bodyguard of a politician went out of the car, shot the gentleman that's protesting and closing the road, and just walked by as if nothing happened. And the bad, well, it's all bad already, but they shot the man in front of his wife and child. There's nothing more evil than such a regime who allows such men to go unpunished.
Allow me to kind of like cut you off. Is there any kind of like, could you talk to us why this poor governance is the order of the day? Is it because there are weaker government institutions? What is for example, parliament doing? Are they not doing the check and balance as required? Or, Could you talk to us? What is the role of
Yeah,
the Palestinians?
I did an episode, a kind of a tiny talk about checks and balances. It wasn't mainly about checks and balances, kind of a tiny lecture. But the problem in Lebanon is that it's not only missing checks and balances; it's missing a whole government. Now, in before the Ta'if was made, and before 1975, and when Lebanon first started as a nation, Lebanon, once it was made, it meant to have a checks and balances system. However, this system was left for the Druze to make. The Druze, which were led by Kamal Jumblat, the Mir family, and a few other, the Emir families, and a few other small families like Abu Habdain and Abdul Samad, and a few small man groups. Now, when this checks and balances system wanted to happen, the Christians refused to make it. The reason being is they said, if the Druze get such a power with such a tiny population, then there would be kind of equality, and the country wouldn't be a Christian nation. This is all a cruel plot, kind of by France to ensure that they would come back. Britain and France both did this to the countries they colonized, so they kind of make sure that there is always conflict between them so they can return. Also, Russia did it with Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and other nations. So it's not only a European issue. So, the checks and balances system meant to happen. There should have been a House of Lords, which did not happen. And because there's no such thing, whenever Nabi Hibri says something, the head of parliament, it becomes a law. And he never looks at the votes. He can just vote himself. For example, one time he said, "Okay, I say we should take a loan for Lebanon for that much. Who's with me?" And he hit the gavel, and walked off as if he's not done anything. And then the few of the members of parliament told him, "Hey, please come back. We need to talk about this." And he just ignored it as if everybody voted, and nobody voted. He didn't look at the hands. He didn't look at anything. And that's when Lebanon's debt started to happen and drift away. Without checks and balances on the ministers that already existed, Lebanon just fell down further and further and further. And although it has really great minds, and it has a lot of investors and a good tourism industry, it can't really survive on that by itself. And with the bomb that happened now, and with the bombs that happened in 2005 to till now even, um, this limited the tourism in Lebanon. It's limited everything in Lebanon, and this has all been a cruel ploy by the same politicians that existed before the war. The general that is now the president of Lebanon, which is Aoun, he tried to make a war in 1992 to kind of get rid of the Druze, the Muslims, and the Sunnis, and he tried to make a kind of Israeli state, but for Christians. So, or ISIS state, but for Muslims, but for Christians. So he wanted to do that.
One final question before we come to of our program today. Could you tell me whether the regional players, as I have mentioned, like the Shiites backed by Iran, or the Sunnis backed by Saudi Arabia and its allies, and the Christians. Do you think this kind of like interference from the region, or even far afield region, like globally, do you think that interference is actually affecting any progress to be made in terms of the statehood or the institution, government institutions to be enhanced and to be stronger?
Absolutely. I think none of the Lebanese are backed by anybody outside. When Iran is backing Shiites, or the Sunnis are backed by Saudis, or etc., except for the small groups who are not backed by anybody, they're not really backing up the Christians or the Sunnis or the Shias or etc. They're just making sure that their own needs, for example, Saudi Arabia, it just makes sure that its own needs in Lebanon is safe. Syria, same thing. Iran, same thing. Everyone is just trying to make sure that they can profit out of Lebanon than anything else. Yes, you want to
Quickly,
say?
could you illuminate on what the Saudi interests are in Lebanon, what the Syrian interests are in Lebanon, what are the Iranian interests are, what Iranian interests are in in Lebanon? What do they? They're different kind of like. What do you think? Each
Okay, so it's a
is
flawed game. The strategy keeps on changing on daily basis. But how I can explain it is when the United States said that they wanted to, in Bush's time, they said that they wanted to attack a kind of a line of nation, which is Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and a few other nations. And then they attacked Afghanistan, they attacked Iraq. Oh, yes, one of them is Iraq. And then they attacked these few nations. So that's when Iran was scared and they started developing their nuclear weapons because knew they were next. And then Syria tried to do the same, although Israel did not allow it. And the bigger problem is that Israel already has nuclear weapons on a secret level in one way or another. Iran does not, and Iran has to protect itself, so it becomes kind of a nation that cannot be attacked. That's why they try to develop their uranium. And the more that Iran tried to make talks, the more sanctions that happened upon it, the more that they tried to make uranium and give more weapons to Hezbollah so they can annoy the United States into forcing peace or making an agreement. In Saudi is just trying to look after their own interests in one way or another. They are scared. I'm not saying that they're innocent, but they're kind of scared that their ideology would not spread, and it's kind of Saudi's kind of playing a new game of I'm the big guns now in the area. I'm the rich nation, and I have to make sure that I spread my ideology, my kind of school of thought around. So that's why there is a lot of school of thoughts based on the Wahhabism idea of Saudi, and now they're spreading around in Lebanon and etc. And it's basically no one is ever backing the Sunnis in Lebanon. The Sunnis are pretty weak. No one's backing the Shiites in Lebanon. The Shiites are pretty poor.
in a nutshell, the Iranians are using Hezbollah for security purposes.
Correct.
The Saudis using the Sunnis for
security
spreading their
purposes as well.
ideology.
And security purposes, yeah.
Actually. And what about Syria?
So Syria, I covered this I think before the interview. I'm not sure, but Syria's its main dream, the dream of Hafez al-Assad, is to make the greater Syria, which is to unite Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, making one big Syrian nation. He keeps on failing, and the fact that they're minority ruling a majority, it's difficult for him to enforce it. The weird thing is he has and he is Syria. When I say he, I mean the Syrian regime, the current Syrian regime, has and is trying to attempt to influence politics in Lebanon and in Jordan and even in Palestine itself. Proof of this is the killing of the assassination of Rafiq Hariri, or a million other things. Sorry, you wanted.
Thank you, Rabbi, for this insightful session. It has kind of like eliminated a lot of the serious issues that are going on in Lebanon and in Beirut in particular. And those are the background issues that are actually have led to maybe the explosion, poor governance, um, kind of like neglect, no proper security around the port, or maybe all the country at large. So thank you very much for participating in today's Everyday Politics show. I am Mohammed Hassan, the presenter of this program, and thanks to our audience who are viewing on our channel. I thank you all for participation. Thank you very much.